Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Today on Let's Talk Winnipeg, we're going to share with you something this government hasn't told you with respect to the Winnipeg firefighter paramedic issue. We know by watching the news, looking at social media, there is a rift between the firefighters and the paramedics. And this rift has been there for some time, and it really hasn't been addressed by the management or leadership at City Hall. It hasn't been talked about. Everyone's afraid of it. Nobody wants to bring the topic up. Just in case. I don't know what just in case, but we're going to share with you what I think is the number one reason why this government is so afraid, and members of the Mayor's Executive Policy Committee, the councillors that make that up, everyone, why they're not sharing with you the truth, the real facts. Because once I tell you, I think you'll understand why we're ignoring this the best we can. And at the very end, we'll spend a couple of seconds talking about the current firefighter contract. It started last year. I went public about the fact the city missed the deadline for the contracts. They weren't able to submit what they were looking for in this upcoming agreement, 4-year or 5-year agreement. That means you'll continue to pay the union president's salary, unless by some chance that gets taken off. But we'll talk about all of that at the end. First and foremost, we know now the union representing the paramedics has sent a letter to the mayor and to the CAO for the city of Winnipeg, asking them to dissolve the agreement, let the paramedics out of the fire stations. This is something that has been talked about for a long time in public. It's a taboo topic in council. Councillors won't get into that discussion for fear. And I know everyone's afraid of this person or that person because of their, political power and so on. But really, how many years do we have to continue doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, expecting something different to happen? When you do the same thing and look for a different result, I don't have to go on anymore. There's one reason, as we were digging into this, I think we came across the one reason why there's some friction, not only between the administration and the province, but we found the reason why this city is afraid to address the issue between the firefighters and paramedics and why they're ignoring it. And it's because you would have to pay tens of millions of dollars to get out of it. Tens of millions of dollars. And then our expenses would go up because of the shell game that we're playing with the paramedics and firefighters. So I want to do this briefly because we could go on all day about this one, because this is part of that fundamental problem I see at City Hall. We're not open and transparent, despite we're very good at saying we're open and transparent, but my goodness. These contracts, the fact that we're not addressing main issues and just letting them continue, is it any wonder we're in trouble? No, these are things that need to be addressed. The number one thing is that the province provides money for the paramedic service, cost recovery. And it never used to be cost recovery, and then the city got, kept pushing for it, and eventually over the last few years, it became cost recovery. If you go back on our podcasts and videos, you'll see where I'm questioning the chief of the fire department about that, and he says it's full cost recovery now. But in that full cost recovery, and in the setup over the years, the city of Winnipeg has padded the Winnipeg firefighter and paramedic units. Not by having more ambulances, that's the last thing. We haven't done that in years. We haven't had a new ambulance on the street. We have the same number of ambulances we do today that we did in 2011. And people are waiting over an hour for an ambulance. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. I digress. So now half of the salary for the chiefs and others are, put over into the paramedic side. Right? Fire paramedics. So they take care of both, so they will split the salary. That's fine. It's part of the game. It's a shell game. I don't like it, but it is part of the shell game. That's how we get our cost recovery. But we have a lot of positions, and I think that's where the battle between the province and the city came, is the province was saying, we don't need all these positions. We run the ambulances without them everywhere else in the province. Why would we pay for those? That became a little bit of a sore point. But you see, the city does something for employees in some contracts that you would never get in a contract. And that's paid out sick time. So if you work for so many years and you don't use your sick days, at the end of it, you'll get a check for some of that money. It's all public. It's part of the agreement. It's part of the contract. You can't blame anybody when it's part of an agreement. There's only one person you can blame, or one place you can blame when something is in a collective bargaining agreement, and that's the institute that signed the contract. It's our job to negotiate the contracts. If we failed at that, that's our fault. Nobody else's. You can't blame it on anyone. I'm sorry. You can't. So if we were to say, okay, paramedics, you go back to the province, we're going to have to pay out that money. And that's tens of millions of dollars that we don't have. Now all of a sudden we've got to pay more. How are we going to pay for the chiefs and all the extra staff that we had and vehicles? Because the province isn't going to take all our paramedic trucks or our special vehicles for supervisors and all that, are they? No. So we're stuck holding the bag. So when I heard on the news a reference to our mayor saying, it's not on us, it's up to the province to do that, that's just not accurate. The province has to agree to it because they are in charge of the paramedics in the province, because it's under health. But we could send a letter tomorrow and say, okay, we're done with this deal. It's not working for us. There's too much friction. We need to get out of it. I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why you wouldn't just take the bull by the horns and fix the problem. It's also a very good opportunity to say, let's clean up the contracts. Oh, but wait. You can't clean up the contracts because yet again, we've failed at our negotiating, and now it's gone to binding arbitration. It all started last year. I talked about this. We failed to meet the deadline. And then a couple weeks after that, after failing just after that, when I put out the news article, when I put out my video on it or podcast, news started talking about it. They asked some members of EPC and they asked the mayor, and the word from the city was, we can't talk about it because we're currently in negotiations. But they weren't, because the negotiations hadn't started yet. You see, you file your wants and needs beforehand so that each party has a chance to review the documents, and then they sit down to have the meetings. Surely they know this. They pretend to know everything, so surely they should have looked it up, right? They didn't. So then I started making waves about the fact that we should not be paying for the union president's salary for the firefighters. We do, because that's what's negotiated. You cannot blame any other person than this institute. We are the one that negotiates the contracts. So now the person that we had just hired to take over all our contracts, to do all the negotiating, left. So we had to bring in somebody from outside. We had to hire a law firm to assist with that. Who knows how much that cost? If I look back on my time in the private sector and when we've had to bring in legal assistance to work on various contracts, it's not cheap. I don't think I'm sharing inside secrets here. It's not cheap. What is it, $400-500 an hour? That's quite a bit of money. That's going to go out of your tax dollars because of how we didn't handle our internal issues better. Now, once that goes to binding arbitration, will the arbitration deal with the salary? 80% chance? Nope. Why, would you ask? Well, it's because we didn't have anything filed. So the arbitrator will ask for the documents that were filed. You had to have everything filed, your wants and desires. Well, we didn't file on time, so that wouldn't be allowed under the rules. Now you say, well, maybe they should let them do it. Well, the city of Winnipeg, when the paramedics failed to file on time once, wouldn't let them. And we took it to court. And we went to binding arbitration. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. what I'm trying to get at here is there's a better way. We have to start holding people accountable. We have to be direct on the changes we need in collective bargaining agreements. We don't have to play this game. We just have to be open and honest about it and sit down and have the conversations. I've been involved in many collective bargaining agreements, lots of negotiations, and that's how we do it. We don't ignore each other and stand in a corner and fight. You sit down with a group of people. Okay, here's where we are. This is where we have to get. Here's why. Where are you and where do you have to get? And let's talk about why. And start having those negotiations. But you can also start those throughout the year. You should always be looking at your collective bargaining agreements and finding the wording and the paragraphs of which that really don't pertain to you anymore. Times change, and when times change, some of these contractual obligations change. Both parties want to clean them up. So why not do that together? Anyways, that's the fundamental problem. We have elected people that will just continue to move forward and ignore things, hoping you won't remember, or hoping you just won't care, or you'll hear it so much that you'll just drown it out because you hear so much about the firefighters and the paramedics fighting and so on. It needs to be fixed. Think about it. If the paramedics did go back to the province, we don't have the money to do that. We don't have the money. And why don't we have the money? Because of the way we've been negotiating over the years. Does that not stand at the top of a mountain in a big red sign and say, our fault? Now, I don't want to hear any more talk or how we're going to do this process or do that, but we need to sit down and we need to start fixing these things. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Send me an email, kevin@kevinklein.ca.